Hey guys, sorry this part came out a bit late, but you know, the reason why is in the update video that I just recently put out. So just check that out quick, you know, because it's important. So but aside from that, you guys, let's get on with part two. Really excited. First encounter. Within the early evening hours, the mountains surrounding Sombra's castle were brutally cold once more. Without anything to keep the temperature from dropping, it dived at an alarming pace, and the winds howled in strength. It had gotten so bad recently, none of Sombra's guards would dare stay out for very long. Even if they were just his vessels without much of a will of their own, they had some ideas about self-preservation, intentionally inserted from their master so that they would survive for more than 5 seconds without his supervision. In spite of the hostile conditions, the entrance doors were opening. A black magical aura was the thing to push them wide, and the unicorn responsible opened the doors as wide as they could go. Sombra's cape flapped around his back from the blizzard, and a harsh cold breeze greeted his face. He took in a deep breath and exhaled hot fumes from his throat, releasing steam everywhere. Just like it used to be for him. He emerged out of the castle and moved through the snow. His hooves left a trail in it, but they would disappear after the constant snowfall filled the hoofprints in. After a few seconds of walking, he stopped in his tracks and thought about the time. Twilight would surely be in the Wispy Woods soon. It was only 10 minutes before their meeting was supposed to take place, and he knew well that she was no fool, and would likely be bringing some kind of protection with her. Thankfully for him, he was no fool either. Still, he took a few moments to go over his plans in his head, from what he would do tonight to what he was going to do after that. He had to make sure everything went perfectly. One botched move and his plans and ambitions would die before his eyes. He waited in his spot, resting his flank on the ground.
Twilight Sparkle. This will be the beginning of something beautiful between the two of us. Now, it is time to begin. Let's see what happens when you get a taste of what is to come.
His horn beamed strongly with magic, and he focused everything he had into this spell of his. The image of a unicorn filled his mind, and trails of fire escaped his horn like those of fireworks. It took a few minutes for the spell to work, hence why he was doing this far away from any pony's sight. After it was prepared, he launched the spell into the air, taking the form of a green sphere. The ball flew up into the air at a dizzying speed, and it went just as fast away to the Wispy Woods. Yet Sombra's horn did not stop glowing with its signature black aura. No, the spell required more than simply casting it away. When he opened his eyes, he did not see the mountains or the castle, but the point of view from the sphere itself. He could see it zipping through the vast reaches of Equestria, from the mountains to the plains to the volcanoes dragons called their home. And soon enough, the ball reached the Wispy Woods. It hovered up in the sky, until it found the stream that would make the meeting place. Sombra brought the sphere to the grassy area near it, and it began to transform the spell into something else. Down in the outreaches of the Wispy Woods, it was quiet save for the occasional cricket. The air was pleasant, but not too stuffy. By this time of year, the trees were in bloom, and the flowers were following suit. However, Twilight could not shake the feeling that something was wrong here. It was a little too quiet, and she thought about preparing a fire spell in case things turned out like she was afraid they would. The two guards walked through the woods with Princess Twilight, carefully keeping an eye on anything that moved. They could not afford to be lax.
What are we supposed to be looking out for?
The first one asked.
Anything. An attack on me? Some kind of ambush? Maybe even Chrysalis. She might be out there,
Twilight responded.
Just make sure it's safe.
Yes, Your Majesty.
As the darkness of the evening grew thicker, she could barely see in front of her. She cast a spell accordingly, creating a light to rest on the top of her horn as a makeshift flashlight. They kept walking through the forest, until one of the guards stopped and pointed his hoof in the air.
Look, Princess Twilight, up above us.
Twilight looked up with the other guard to see what it was, but there was nothing above their heads save for the trees in the star-filled sky.
Vanguard, I don't see anything. Are you sure it wasn't just a firefly? Twilight asked.
It was right there,
said Vanguard.
I've never seen anything like it before. It was a small green ball, but it looked like it was made of magic. It must have flown off.
That could be something. If you see it again, let me know.
After a few more minutes of trotting through the forest, she could hear water flowing through a stream a few meters away. She knew it was the stream she was looking for. There was only one stream in the wispy woods, after all. And upon a closer look, she could make out that there was a stallion there. He kicked his hooves around, waiting for some pony to show up. There was a saddlebag on his back, and it had something heavy inside.
Stay here,
she commanded the guards.
You know the signal.
The guards nodded and saluted her. Now alone in her travel, she came closer to the stream. The more she saw of the unicorn, the more her fears appeared to be baseless. This wasn't the kind of pony to attack her, at least in his outward appearance. The stallion was a unicorn, tall and slender. His coat had a dark green color, and his mane was shaggy with a lighter shade of the same color. His cutie mark was that of a tree, with the base covered entirely in mist. Made sense to her, if the pony was truly named Forest Mist. He moved his head when he heard something, and realized that Twilight had arrived. He rose up from his spot and went to her, leaping across the narrow stream's bank to join her on the other side.
Princess Twilight Sparkle, what an honor it is to finally meet you in person,
the pony said while he bowed down to her.
My name is Forest Mist, as I have written, and it is true after all that you are beautiful.
She thought nothing of the compliment, still a little on edge.
Yes, so you really are Forest Mist after all. What did you bring me out here in the woods for? You could have easily come down to Ponyville. I'm allowing visitors.
Have you not read the letter?
Forest Mist puzzled.
I told you why I could not come to you like I would have. There are ponies that would do anything to see this book in their hooves. It could be worth millions of bits by now. I know how desperate they are myself.
He turned his left cheek for Twilight to see. There was a huge scar going from the top of his cheek to the skin on his neck. Twilight gasped when he saw the old wound.
Oh my goodness! I am so sorry. I had no idea.
Why would you? Up until today, you wouldn't know I existed, and I haven't lived in any of the Equestria towns for years.
He carefully studied her reactions, just to see if they were right on track. Twilight's expression had changed from tense to calm to sympathetic in the span of their conversation, meaning she was on his side.
This is too easy. You show them a scar, make up a dreadful backstory about it, and then they choose to like you. Why didn't I do something like this sooner?
You mean you've never lived in any town? For years?
Yes. You see, my cutie mark pertains to my talent in maintaining forests. That's why I chose to live out in one by myself. It isn't as miserable as most ponies would assume, and it only got better once my cabin was finished. Now, about that book.
Twilight snapped out of the conversation.
Oh, right! The lost book from Star Swirl the Bearded. Tell me, why was it lost for such a long time?
You of all ponies should know the moment you read the title.
He used his magic to open the flap on his saddlebag, and there Twilight could see the book she had come for. When Forest brought the book out of hiding, she could see that it was the thickest book by Star Swirl she had ever seen. It had to be enough to fit 3 copies of the Fire Magic book inside. The cover was almost entirely black, but with a few curves of decoration done in white. There was a box dedicated to just the title on it, and that's when everything clicked for her. It read, About the Secrets of Dark Magic, by Star Swirl the Bearded.
What? Star Swirl the Bearded wrote an entire volume about that, and it got lost? How is that even possible? Is it even a Star Swirl book to begin with?
Twilight demanded to know.
Why don't you look for yourself?
Forest Mist responded. He pushed the book forward to Twilight.
Fine, I will.
She grabbed the book herself through her magic, and flipped through the pages to read for herself. One thing she noted was how the pages were worn out and slightly decayed. Apparently it was not as well preserved as Star Swirl's other works, but she could read the words just fine.
Oh, how to describe this field of magic? There are scarcely enough words in the vocabulary to say how fascinating this new dark magic is. There is so much to cover, so much to see, that I find myself overwhelmed, and they have called me the greatest mage of this present day. My apologies to the reader for writing a book so large it could be split into 2 volumes, but I could hardly contain myself. When you begin reading about the techniques and of this field, you will be astonished as I was. It contains power so great, it could change the landscape of the magical realm forever.
Well, it sounds like Star Swirl.
Twilight trailed off. She kept reading over these 2 paragraphs. It was awesome to read something that she had never read before from her idol. The wealth of wisdom in the opening page alone was something to see, and deep down, she was feeling like a filly in school all over it. Forrest Mist chuckled while he was watching Twilight read the opening page again, realizing he had her right where he wanted.
Look at her now. She doesn't even know what I'm doing to her. I bet no pony would know. It's just too innocent.
He kept smiling, and Twilight was prepared to read all 800 pages right there, but she stopped and turned to see Forrest again.
I really like this. Thanks so much for giving me this book. But why are you giving it to me, and not Princess Celestia up in Canterlot?
He clenched his teeth to hide his contempt, hating to hear the very name of that would-be ruler. Your name has been well spread throughout Equestria by now. You have the authority to do whatever it is you find necessary to keep this country in check. And it's also well known that you are a big fan of Starswirl the Bearded. It seemed like the right thing to do with those 2 things in mind. Twilight was startled to hear that, even shocked.
Wow, you were really thoughtful of me.
At that moment, she did something that caught even Forrest Mist off guard. He felt himself being hugged tight by the alicorn, like she would hug a friend. It didn't last long, but it left a huge impact on his mind.
Things might proceed faster than expected. Sombra, you did everything perfectly.
I really don't know what to say, other than thank you. I'll be sure to have this book studied and taken care of,
said the alicorn. No, thank you, he said, bowing before the princess. It was an honor to deliver something like this to you, and I hope to see you again shortly, Your Majesty. Twilight smiled, and bowed her head as well.
I think we will see each other again, too. It was a pleasure to meet you, Forest Mist.
She turned around and headed for the place where the guards waited for her. She thought it turned out much better than she thought, especially with the new Star Swirl book hovering near her side. Forest Mist stood there by the stream, waving her away. All in all, she thought it was a good night, and he was occupying her thoughts. The guards could hear her approaching and met her halfway, seeing that she was all right.
Was the meeting a success?
Said the other guard.
Yes, it was, First Strike,
Twilight responded.
There was no ambush, no attack, and he kept to his word. It was just a weird way to meet some pony, but he didn't do anything wrong.
Perfect. I expected an attack after seeing that sphere,
said Vanguard.
Still, there will be a threat made to your name eventually. I still wonder what that ball was about.
I don't know either, Twilight said. Do we know what it could possibly be? I've never heard of any sort of magic that works like that before.
They went on their way to Ponyville, never bothering to look back at the stream on their way back. If they had looked, they would have gotten their answer about the sphere. Forest Mist would later transform into a magic ball, and fly off for a certain direction. In time, the sphere returned back to the hostile mountains it came from. It blazed through Equestria again, and soon enough it returned to rest inside Sombra's horn. He was able to see the area around him again, and not from an outside source. His cape flapped around so violently, he was curious what was keeping it attached to his neck. But more than anything else, he laughed. And he laughed hard at everything.
You are far too easy to appeal to, Twilight Sparkle,
he shouted.
I thought you were one of the most loyal and dedicated ponies to the truth. But all one has to do to get your attention is disguise themselves as your newest friend. Celestia would be ashamed of you right now if she could see this.
He shook his head in complete disbelief, not comprehending what had occurred that night. But he could not deny that the hug stunned him more than anything else Twilight did. What was he supposed to say to this? Was it so easy to accomplish his goals that all he had to do was... No, he couldn't take it for granted now. There was more work for him to do, and going about it like he had it in the bag would cost him dearly. Patience. It wouldn't be long before he wouldn't be able to make out his own castle through the darkness, and so he trotted for his home. The doors were open for him to come in, and he shut them through his magic as he went indoors. Some of the guards waited for him by the entrance, curious to see if their master was pleased with the evening's events.
If you were planning to ask me how things went, they could not have gone better,
he said, his words echoing through the room.
Our plan is working perfectly. The seed has been planted in Twilight Sparkle's head, and it will soon grow. We will be victorious in our mission, and sooner than any pony of us thought.
The guards gleamed in delight, as he wanted them to. When he rested on his throne later that night, he was the happiest he'd been in some time. By this time tomorrow, he couldn't wait for it. He really couldn't. By then, he could almost taste the thrill of victory. It was almost 10 in the evening by the time Twilight returned to Ponyville. She had half expected some sort of huge parade to be waiting for her, given that every hour was party hour to Pinkie Pie. But there was no pony out there. It was quiet, and most of the town's ponies were in their beds. She was getting tired herself, and a nice bed sounded wonderful.
"Vanguard, First Strike, you are released from your duty for the rest of the night," she said to them. "It doesn't appear like we're going to see any threats for tonight, so I think it's safe for you to take a break."
They yawned after they were given the command. Apparently they were just as exhausted as she was. After another salute, they took off their helmets and flew towards the Soul Hotel in Ponyville, a small but nice 2-story place. Speaking of which, Twilight realized one thing she could put in Ponyville: a barrack for the incoming guards that would soon reside there along with her, with the 2 she already had. When they were gone and no pony could hear what she was going to do, she clutched tightly to the Star Swirl book with her own hooves and almost squealed in delight. It was going to be the sole book she would read that week. She just knew it! But she still had to get her shut-eye and knew it. So she hovered the book by her side again and found herself at the doorstep to her house. All the lights in the windows were turned off except for one, the closest to the front door. And she must have been a heavy walker, since Spike opened the door before she even knocked on it.
"Hey, Twilight, you're finally home!" said the purple dragon. "How did it go with Forest Mist?" "It went pretty well," said Twilight, coming close to yawning. "Look at this!"
She gave Spike the book. He struggled with the weight, but read the title for himself.
"Ah, so it is a Star Swirl book. Guess he wasn't lying after all." "No, he was a pretty nice stallion. Believe it or not, there wasn't anything suspicious about him at all. He was the only pony out there." "That's good to know. Oh man, this book is heavy!"
He ran over to the study desk and dumped the book on it.
"That has to be at least 20 pounds! "Well, it is an older book. It is really interesting to read. I might use it tomorrow, actually." "Fine by me, but I gotta get some sleep. Good night, Twilight." "Good night, Spike."
She yawned again, and she was getting sleepier and sleepier. Spike turned off the light by the front door and went for his own bed. He tucked himself into the blankets and started to doze off. Twilight took off all her jewelry and placed them near her bed, while she slipped into her own blanket. It felt nice to finally rest in her nice and peaceful home in Ponyville, and the currents of sleep were taking over her eyes. But she couldn't stop watching the book from across the room. With its intricate cover and the guarantee of amazing knowledge that came with Star Swirl's name, she couldn't wait to learn all of the lessons inside and discover the ins and outs of dark magic, something she knew very little about. She was so excited about it, the book wound up being the last thing she saw before she finally fell asleep. Scratching the surface. When a dragon has problems carrying a simple book, that's when one knows it's unreasonably heavy. Even a baby dragon like Spike was as strong as many ponies were in their entire lifetimes, so when the new Star Swirl book felt like a load on his fingers, it was a miracle the study desk could support it at all without it collapsing. And yet there it was, still in place by the early morning hours. The desk didn't buckle at all, and it was able to carry the weight relatively well. Over in Canterlot, Celestia went to work on raising the sun, bringing it over the little town of Ponyville. Spike normally reacted to the sunlight by pulling the blanket over his eyes and mumbling some variation of 5 more minutes before sleeping again. But this morning, he suddenly woke up when he heard Twilight racing around him to get the book. In her wake, the basket tipped over and he fell face first onto the ground. He flailed his arms around, going from having a dream with Rarity to having his nose in pain.
"What?"
he said while he crashed.
"What's going on? Don't tell me Fancy Pants proposed to Rarity!" No, it's tomorrow now, Twilight squealed. That means I can finally put this book to good use!
She levitated the book off the desk and came a few inches from hugging the book again. Her magic flipped to the opening pages, and she soaked in the words once more.
Hey, Spike, do you think we could make some kind of target range today? We could use a few stacks of hay and a few plates. I saw something about offensive magic, and that's what I want to try out first.
Wait just a second. I thought you had some duties to perform today, Spike brought up. Let me see. I know you wrote something down before you went to see Forest Mist.
He came to the drawer that they always used to store the planners inside. The planner was full of notes and needed replacing soon for one that featured 5 years of planning, given what Twilight would be doing in the future. The dragon flipped to the current week and put a finger on the day's date. It had a few scribbled notes here and there.
There we are. You have a meeting in an hour with Mayor Mare to talk about what you want to do with Ponyville, since you're going to be living here as royalty now. Then we have 3 hours open until you have to attend a Welcome Princess Twilight party. Pinkie Pie said she just had to throw one for you.
Twilight blushed in embarrassment.
I guess I got carried away with the book. We could use those 3 hours for target practice. But first things first, let's get ready to see the mayor.
She spent the next 30 minutes making herself presentable for the meeting. It bothered her that she allowed herself to get distracted like that, when she had much more things she had to be responsible for. Maybe Celestia was the same way when she gained the title of princess. Twilight never saw her study magic in her downtime, but she must have learned on the job in the early years. Either way, she couldn't wait for the meeting to be over. The opportunity to study dark magic was just too juicy. She tipped the crown carefully on her head, and slipped her hooves into the golden sandals. Spike watched her get dressed, or wear enough that she would be immediately recognized as a princess.
How do I look, Spike?
You look pretty good. Do you want me to come with you, or do you want that practice range set up already?
The latter, if you don't mind. I'll meet you over there when the meeting's over.
Since it was springtime in the rest of Equestria, the conditions of Sombra's castle improved little by little. Whiteout storms gave way to regular snow showers, and the temperature transitioned from staying below 0 to coming closer to the freezing mark. Sombra could still make out steam coming out of his breath when he went out for his walks, which were becoming a regular part of his day. He didn't have much to do until the time came to get started on the next part of his plans. To kill some time, he sat down on the snow and stopped to dwell on his circumstances. His anger towards Celestia would only act as a barrier for the next few days and weeks, so he thought on what he would have done to the Princess of the Sun if he won, what he wanted to do when he finally did win. Perhaps she could be imprisoned in a crystal, where she would never escape from its imprisonment, helpless to watch Sombra turn her precious Equestria into his own crystal kingdom. It helped. By the stars, it helped. He relaxed his limbs and laughed at his plans for that moment. It would come to fruition if he stayed patient. And now, with everything in place, he wanted to ensure that things were ready. He glowed his horn with dark magic of his own, and something formed in front of his eyes. He would know where the book was. It was drenched with his influence, and the spell created a screen, showing him the exact location of the book. To his surprise, Twilight wasn't there, but Spike the Dragon was. His claws clung around the covers of his book. Sombra did not understand what he was seeing with this dragon. A red stallion was with him, one he never saw before. There was a yoke attached to his back, carrying a cart of haystacks. Then he started to pick up on what they were doing. Apparently, they were in a valley overlooking Ponyville, and Spike said something to the one named Big Mac about target practice and a meeting with the mayor of Ponyville. Ah, so Twilight was preoccupied with her duties and would be arriving at that valley shortly. He was right on time, and only had to wait a little more. Still, he could sense the book had been tampered with, like it was opened many times before. That would make sense. He knew Twilight loved the book at first sight, and the next phase of his plan was simple enough. All he needed to do was make it appear that he was not involved with the next events, therefore making it feel natural and not suspicious at all. Easy. Far too easy. But then again, what was there to complain about? Doesn't every bad guy secretly wish their plans would go this smoothly?
That's all you want to do for the first year? Expand your house by a few rooms? I thought you would have asked for a statue of yourself, a bigger fountain in the main square, and more guards,
the mayor said.
No, not for a while at least,
Twilight responded.
I don't want Ponyville to become a second Canterlot. I like things the way they are, but I just need a little more space at my house. 2 royal guards is enough for now. I thought about putting in some barracks, but after thinking about it today, That might need to wait. Why did you think I was going to ask for things like that?
Well, we've never had a princess live here before, even if it's a pony that's been living with us for a few years. This is unprecedented, so I'm sure you can understand why I was expecting a lot of monumental changes.
I understand, but I wanted to stay as the little peaceful town near Canterlot. It's nice, and we've been able to handle any threats against Ponyville. After all, the other 5 elements of harmony lived here too.
For this meeting, the mayor had a couple of cups brought in, full of tea. They were neatly placed with a few napkins and a plate full of flowers. It gave the room an atmosphere of formality and neatness. The same went with the 2 guards waiting in the hallway near the door. In that room, it struck Twilight that this was her first real taste of the new authority given to her. The mayor was bending over backwards to accommodate her, because she was below the princess in power now. That took more than a few minutes to adjust to.
Do you want some more tea? I have a pitcher in the other room,
the mayor said.
No thanks, I'm not finished with my first cup. Now, I understand your term is almost over.
I was planning to step down and give you that position.
Mayor, while I know you're being considerate of me, go ahead and run for re-election. I'm not taking over the government in that manner for a while. But should we discuss how we're going to build the expansion to my house?
Neither one of them spoke up after she asked the question. Twilight didn't have any experience with construction, and the mayor wasn't sure how far to go with it. The princess messed around with the straw in her cup, swishing it around. The mayor took a few bites out of her stash of flowers to hold off her stomach for lunchtime. They heard the guard say something to a visitor on the outside, something about royal business, and they should come back in an hour. Then out of the air, Twilight got an idea.
We could arrange a meeting with Princess Celestia to discuss it.
You can do that now? Of course you can,
she corrected herself.
At her castle in Canterlot?
Twilight nodded.
That is, if you're open.
It might have to wait for a while. Let me check my schedule.
She brought out her own planner out of the desk and came to the current month of the year.
I'm open 3 weeks from Tuesday, so we'll have the meeting then. Are you open at the same date?
I think so. Is there anything else you want to go over?
If you don't have any other plans to build anything, I think this meeting is over.
Twilight's eyes lit up. That meant she was free to go to the target range and finally practice what she read about. She shook hooves with the mayor and ran out of the room as fast as she could. She pushed the door wide open, and it almost slammed into Vanguard's face. He jumped to the side right before the moment of impact, and he posed like there was some kind of invasion.
What is the meaning of this? Did something go wrong?
He asked.
No, not at all. I've just been really looking forward to this moment all day. Keep an eye on the house while I'm gone. You're doing a good job so far.
The purple alicorn didn't look back when she rushed out of the town hall and arrived outside the main square of Ponyville. By then, the town's ponies were out in the street, minding their daily routines and chatting with each other. They occasionally stopped when they caught Twilight's crown, gawking at her while she raced through the streets. The valley she picked for the range was a little ways off from the main hub of Ponyville, but she got through the town in no time. She was so excited to get started she didn't want to waste any time. After some time, she found the dirt path leading up to the valley. It was upscale and sloped, but she could make out Spike sitting on one of the haystacks. He snacked on a few gems while he read through the Star Swirl book himself.
Hi, Spike!
She shouted to him.
Is everything ready?
Spike perked up his ears and caught Twilight arriving to the valley.
Yep, everything is set. This book is kinda weird, though. This isn't like any book I've read, and you had me read an entire book on ancient pony language. Are you sure this is a Star Swirl book?
I know it is. It has his writing style and everything.
When she arrived at the improvised target range, it was set up beautifully. A dozen haystacks were placed in a half-circle design, and each one had a plate propped up into place. The plates obviously came from Pinkie Pie. Who else would give out plates that were as pink as her mane, with confetti designs outlining them?
Can you hand me the book, Spike?
Twilight asked. He pushed the book off the haystack, and she picked it up with her magical grab. She brought it to her face and opened it up to the table of contents, past the author's notes and introduction. Oh, Celestia, this was turning out to be a longer read than she thought. The table of contents alone went for 3 pages, and there wasn't a section shorter than 10 pages. Some went for 50 or more. It had to be the longest book ever written by Star Swirl the Bearded. There was one section she decided to focus on for the day. It was roughly in the middle of the contents, and it covered the topic of projectile attacks. That was the purpose of the target range, so she would have some target to aim her magic on. Better than accidentally setting something on fire inside of the treehouse.
She moved hundreds and hundreds of pages aside to get to the projectile section, and read the wise ancient words of Starswirl the Bearded.
This axe can be used against your foes, though I have found other uses for it, such as dimming candles and creating hiding spots for stealthy maneuvers. But if you are new to this, I would recommend using it only for offense attacks until you have a better bearing on this technique. First, find something to attack.
Already taken care of. She looked to the plate on the far left.
Second, brace yourself for the powers of dark magic. To the inexperienced, it will seem as if dark magic has a will of its own. That is right and wrong. You ultimately have control of it, but it will require a master. It has to be tamed, one would say. Third, face your foe and concentrate on the spell you intend to cast.
Twilight put the book down and aimed her horn for the plate. Her other thoughts were pushed aside in favor of thinking about all the properties of dark magic. How Sombra used it. How she turned it to her advantage. She closed her eyes to concentrate. The air around her sparked with electricity, humming the strength of something unnatural. Spike ran to her aid, thinking she was in trouble. The air kept crackling around the princess, almost hitting his feet. He jumped back in surprise.
Twilight, are you okay?
When Twilight opened her eyes, their whites were replaced with a nasty green color. Her voice had a slight echo effect when she breathed. He backed away, already jumping to thinking that he should send a certain letter to a certain other princess.
Don't worry, Spike.
She assured him.
This is just part of the process. My eyes will go back to normal when I'm finished.
I don't know. This is scary. The last pony that did that was Sombra. And you know how it went over with me.
It's okay. I'm not going to hurt you or any pony else.
She picked the book back up again, looking at the last part of the instructions.
Finally, think about a small spark of raw dark magic. It should form on your horn, and you must release it when it forms. There are no consequences for waiting too long, other than the spell will fade out before you cast it.
The spark turned into a thought inside her, and she allowed it to fill her mind. At that moment, the spell formed on her horn in the image of a small black ball. While she had the spell already, 2 trails of purple mist emitted from her eyes. Knowing the time was right, she released the spell to the plate on the haystack. When she did, an enormous black spark emerged out of her horn, like a black bolt of lightning. It hit the target almost immediately after release. The plate exploded into 1,000,000 pieces, and those shards flew in 1,000,000 directions. The haystack crashed down with it, sending strands of hay into the springtime breeze. Spike hid under another haystack for cover. There was no way this was supposed to happen, right? His palms quivered by his side, and he was prepared to do anything to snap Twilight out of it. But everything just stopped. The lightning bolt spell was spent, and it ceased its destruction. Twilight's eyes were still green, but the trails of smoke vanished. One thing they could agree on. The spell took tons of energy to cast. Her limbs wobbled, sweat drenched her face, and she had to take frequent breaths to catch up.
Wow, that took a lot out of me, she admitted. Casting your first spell is difficult enough, but this is different.
Spike came out of hiding and ran to her aid. She sat down on her flank and leaned on the dragon for support. Though she wasn't that exhausted.
I still don't know about this, Twilight,
Spike worried.
That was the weirdest spell you've ever done. I'm telling you, something's not right about this.
I told you it's fine. I have it under control, and nothing's wrong. It's a Star Swirl book, after all.
To prove she was fine, she got back on all fours and regained her composure. She wiped the sweat off her forehead and felt a lot better about herself. She couldn't see it, feel it, or hear it, but there was some pony else with her, and he was pleased to see the green eyes she featured. It was the sign of opportunity, shining bright for him to see.
Yes, the time has come for the next part of my plan. Come, Twilight Sparkle, you've only scratched the surface of the true power of dark magic. Now you will have a bigger taste of what it can really do.
Out of left field, Twilight's horn glowed again with dark magic. The trails of smoke came out stronger than ever, and she levitated off the ground. Her eyes were pure green, free of any pupils. Her fur turned to a darker shade of purple. This was not supposed to be happening. She knew full well that much was true when she felt her hooves lift off on their own, and she heard Spike run again for shelter. Her horn was one big hub of dark magic, and she had no control over what it was doing anymore. She watched in terror when all 11 plates and haystacks turned to dust, all from her own magic. Just as soon as she lost control of her horn, she had it again,
and she fell to the ground and collided with the hard soil, groaning from the pain. Stars whirled around her face, and she could barely shake them away. There was only one way she could sit up, and that was on her flank again.
What happened? Spike? Are you still there?
The dragon had fled for some distance, but the moment he heard some pony call his name, he ran back to see her state.
I'm so sorry. I was going to send a letter to Celestia, but I didn't bring any paper with me, so I ran to the house to get some. It looked like you were going to destroy Ponyville.
It's okay, Spike. I'm back to normal.
But what was that?
He hyperventilated.
I'm not sure. There was something in this book about how you needed to master dark magic, and how it would look like it had a mind of its own.
A mind of its own? Are you crazy? There's no way you can keep practicing that. What if some pony gets hurt? Or if it kills you?
Twilight opened up her mouth to speak, but nothing came out. She needed to think about this, and she paced back and forth while she did so.
You're right. That was extremely potent. Nothing like I've seen before. And this was just the first time.
Spike sighed in relief. So the nightmare was over.
Then again, it was similar to the time I got my cutie mark.
What? Don't tell me you're going to keep studying this!
Look, when I got my cutie mark, I had no control over myself. It wasn't that different from today, where I levitated myself. And I turned my parents into cacti. And you turned into a dragon almost as big as the time you let your greed get the better of you.
Spike blushed until his cheeks were bright red. It wasn't a memory he cherished. The only good thing that came out of it was getting close to Rarity through it.
But that was different,
he eventually pointed out.
You got better with time. And it was supposed to happen. With your cutie mark and everything.
I guess you have a point. I still want to see if I can get some control on things with time, but if things get any more wild, I'm finished. Does that sound good to you?
Maybe. I'm not looking forward to the next time we do this. Do you think you could do something lighter?
Deal. Maybe something like casting a few shadows for fun.
That was what Spike wanted to hear. He exhaled a few times, before they both turned to the 11 piles of dust.
Should we clean up this mess?
He asked.
It's just dust out in a meadow. We can leave this alone. But I'm going home to rest up a bit before the party. I know Pinkie topped herself. I just know it.
They went on home, all while not realizing the force of nature that kept his eye on them.
How much ahead of schedule could one be? My control of Twilight is stronger than I predicted after 3 weeks of practice. Her mental defenses must have been down after she met Forest Mist. Given that in mind, perhaps I could use this to my advantage again.
The eye left them in peace, and went to work on another task. After walking through Ponyville and dealing with another token of respect from the 1000th pony, this one being a half-eaten muffin from a certain male mare, Twilight and Spike came back home. The 2 guards were already guarding her house by the front door.
So how many cakes do you think she's making? Asked Spike. I heard she closed down the Sugar Cube Corner just to work on the party. That's why I haven't had a good cupcake in 2 weeks.
I'm guessing 40. Just give me a second and we'll talk about it inside.
She approached First Strike and noticed a letter over his shoulder.
Who sent that letter?
He calls himself Forest Mist.
First Strike answered.
He says he's a good friend of yours, and he asked me to deliver this to you the first moment I see you. Is it true that he's a good friend of yours?
Well, I don't know about being a good friend, but he's a friend. Can you hand over the letter?
Yes, your majesty.
He gave Twilight the piece of paper. She found it had the same seal as the first letter, and broke it open with her own magic.
Dear Princess Twilight Sparkle, sorry I can't attend to the party the pony Pinkie Pie is throwing for you. She's turning this town into her own little carnival, and I would assume that you'll have a good time this afternoon. I couldn't talk to you myself, since I have some business to attend to. I was in Ponyville this morning to purchase some seeds, and summer is approaching. Those seeds must be planted on time, not a day later. My apologies, but I'm sure you understand. Since you must be occupied with the party and your new studies, I ask if I can see you again tomorrow night at the Quiet Meadow Cafe in Ponyville that I've heard about. Same time as our last meeting. We could discuss how your studies are coming along, among other things. Once again, I apologize. This was the best I could do on such short notice, but I'll try to be more accommodating to your new schedule in the future. With much respect, Forest Mist.
A quiet meeting. Dozens of cakes, more games than Twilight ever knew existed, breaking all kinds of logic and then some, Pinky saying something about feeling sad that they only got a glimpse of the epic party without explaining to any pony who they were, and every pony got cardboard cutouts of crude horns and wings, regardless of whether they had one or the other. Yup, it was a Pinkie Pie party. When she finally got to throw a party for the newest princess in town, the next few hours of Twilight's life flashed before her eyes. It was the largest party Pinkie had thrown in a long time, one no pony would soon forget. Rather than just giving Twilight a glorified second coronation in Ponyville, festival was the closest thing to describe what she pulled off. And Twilight was tired when it was all said and done. Her hooves were aching, she got sick at the very sight of another slice of cake, and the games wore her out so much. She didn't wake up until 8 in the morning the following day. A whole hour and a half behind schedule, for the record. Trying to plan out the day with a whole hour missing was tough, but she managed to get a few business transactions taken care of, and she even managed to find time in the evening where she could see a certain unicorn again. She waited for him at an outdoor table in the evening. The Quiet Meadow Cafe was the only sidewalk cafe in Ponyville, and like its town, it was small and peaceful, but still having a sense of class that seemed more at home with Canterlot than here. As soon as she took her seat, a waiter arrived to her table with a menu in his magical grip. The unicorn wore a tuxedo and spoke with a thick Trottingham accent. "Welcome to the cafe, your majesty." "Please, call me Twilight," she corrected. "Right, Twilight Sparkle. Is there anything I can get you to drink?" "Could you get me a second menu? I'm expecting some pony soon." "Of course." He levitated a second menu out from his jacket and brought it to the opposite chair on the table. "Are you ready with your order?" "A caramel latte, please." The waiter bowed to her presence and went outside the cafe's doors to prepare the order. If there was one thing Twilight was starting to discover, she wasn't sure if she liked the constant bowing whenever she said anything at all. It embarrassed her, and she felt so undeserving of the respect they gave her, regardless of if she saved Equestria 3 times in a row with her friends. Maybe she could get used to it with time, but right now, she was debating inside whether or not there should be an order just to treat her like a normal pony. She adjusted her crown and sandals while she waited for Forest Mist to show up. She wasn't nearly as picky about her appearance as Rarity was, but she wanted to look presentable for him all the same. The sun dipped under the mountains to the west, and the moon took its place in the clouds. The sky darkened to a weak shade of orange, and within minutes the stars would come out. There were a few ponies tending to last-minute business, but otherwise every pony would be at home. Twilight's ears perked up when she spotted Forest Mist on the other side of the street. He wore a jacket made out of dark green cloth, covering his backside and neck, but his bag wasn't with him this time. He seemed just as thrilled to see her again, and trotted over to her table. "It's nice to see you again, Twilight Sparkle. I heard the party was a success." Her cheeks blushed red. Her hooves were still aching from playing Pin the Tail on the princess 50 times in a row. "You should have been there. I think you would have enjoyed it." "I had more urgent matters to take care of, but I'll try to be there for the next party," he said while he sat down in the seat across from Twilight. He peered down at the menu in front of him. What he saw was like reading a book in a foreign language. "What is this? Coffee? Lattes?" "You've never heard of coffee?" Twilight puzzled. "No, I'm afraid I haven't. Maybe I should order a black coffee first, just to find out what it is." The waiter arrived and brought out Twilight's latte, in a tall glass on top of a small plate. He placed it neatly in front of the princess, and noticed the green unicorn sitting next to her. "Is this the pony you were talking about?" the waiter inquired. "Yes, he'll take a cup of black coffee." The waiter left again, leaving the two by themselves. It was in that moment that Twilight realized how handsome Forest Mist was. She didn't even consider the thought of dating him, since it was only their second meeting, but his features stood out to her even then. He was as tall and lanky as Big Macintosh, but much more slim in muscle. His snout curved at the top and his cheeks hollowed out. His eyes slitted with their eyelids, and he appeared almost exotic in his build. And the more she looked at him, the more she wanted to know about this pony. "So how have you enjoyed the new book?" he brought up. "I hope the condition of the print didn't get in the way. Some of the pages are almost ruined, if I recall." "I haven't had any problems with the book at all. Most of them are pretty easy to read, when you consider how old it is, and I got to practice with it for a few minutes yesterday." Ah, so she already considered practicing it again. He could feel her excitement in her tone. "Why only a few minutes, if you don't mind me asking?" "That's the problem. I found the results very promising at first, but then I hit a few setbacks.
After I cast just one spell, I lost control of myself and destroyed a dozen haystacks.
Ah, sounds like the kind of thing that would cause any pony to stop. Are you going to quit, or are you going to keep practicing?
I'm going to keep practicing it if I can, get a better handle on things. I know I can do it, but I have to be more careful in the future to make sure it never happens again.
Perfect.
I understand. Dark magic can be a touchy field of magic. No pony's touched it in centuries to my knowledge, because of the pony they most associate it with.
And who would that be?
Twilight asked, leaning in close. King Sombra, of course. But he's dead now, right?
I watched him die in person.
The longer you keep believing that, the better it is for me.
They kept quiet after finishing that line of thought. Forrest saw how uncomfortable Twilight was, fidgeting in her seat while she had a few sips of her strange orange drink. And then he noticed how easy it was to strike a conversation with her. She was just as intellectually curious as he was at her age. It was always a wonderful thing to meet a pony like that, and he realized his image of her was changing from it. From just a pawn of Celestia's to one that actually deserved to wear the crown on her head. The waiter arrived back at their table, with a cup of black stuff and a spoon by the side. Forrest had never seen anything like it before.
Give me one moment with this, the waiter explained. You will thank me later.
He brought out a few packets of cream and sugar, and mixed the contents with Forrest's drink. It was a marvel to watch as his cup turned from black to dark yellow before his eyes. Twilight laughed while his eyes were glued to his coffee drink, almost like it was a show upon itself.
You can drink it, you know.
Now he was the one blushing. How could he, the king of shadows, be in such a pitiful state that he was reduced to watching cream swirl around in a caffeinated drink? But he ignored it and used his magic to bring the cup to his lips, taking a few drinks with his snout. A strange feeling washed over his chest when the coffee went down his throat. It was like a bunch of butterflies flew all around his stomach, and he felt more energetic than he ever did in his lifetime. He took another drink, and the sensation grew intensely. This coffee was doing wonders for him, and he felt much less sleepy. I like this coffee. Perhaps I should bring some of it home with me when we're done here. I could get used to this.
They sell a few bags of coffee beans inside, if you like it that much.
Then that's what I'll do. Thanks for introducing this coffee to me. They shared another quiet moment together, drinking their cups of coffee in peace. It was something that Twilight cherished. Just a moment to calm down with some pony after the chaotic mess that was Pinkie Pie's all-day party. And he noticed just how much she enjoyed his company. She was staring at his face all the time, but she said nothing. Her expression said everything he needed to hear, with that smile on her lips. The second phase of his plan was already taking effect before the first part was over. It was already finished in a way, so now was the right moment to move the next chess piece in place. So what do you plan on doing with yourself in this next week? He thought out loud.
A lot of things, actually. You know, princess duties and such. In a few weeks I'll have a meeting with Celestia and the Mayor in Canterlot. Really important. We'll be talking about the future of Ponyville. But there's something else before that. Cadence invited me to come over to her palace this coming weekend.
He stopped in the middle of drinking his coffee, and brought the cup down on the plate in surprise. Cadence? As in, Cadence, the princess of the Crystal Empire?
Are you sure you just live in the forest? You seem to know an awful lot about current events.
I travel to towns every now and then for supplies, but you're having dinner with her?
Of course I would. She was my full sitter for a long while, and she's my brother's wife.
Ah, very good to hear about her, he said. Come to think of it, I've never been to the Crystal Empire since it was restored to its former glory.
You haven't? It's a wonderful place, full of crystals and interesting culture.
Then she stopped in the middle of a thought. Her eyes glowed with delight when she came up with an idea.
Maybe you could come with me to the dinner. Get to meet my brother and sister-in-law. They would love to know all about you, and they're really nice to their subjects, too.
On the surface, Forest Mist appeared very surprised to hear this, but deep down, he realized he'd just hit the opportunity of a lifetime. Everything he wanted to accomplish, he could do with this dinner. It was so perfect, so full of promising opportunities, that he wondered if she was considerate of his ambitions in the end. If it wasn't for the fact that he had a cover to maintain, he would have been laughing like any other classic villain. And when he was done wrapping up his plans, he would consider giving Twilight a medal, just for making things as easy as she did. You would do that for me?
Why not? You seem like a really nice pony, And you've never been there before. It would be an honor to show you around the Crystal Empire.
Ah, home sweet home.
Thank you, Twilight. I would be thrilled to take you up on your offer. When and where do you want to meet me at?
Try to be at my house by Saturday, 8 in the morning. We'll be having lunch over there.
Will do. This will be amazing to see from my own eyes. They finished up their coffee drinks down to the last drop. By then, nighttime had fallen, and Luna's moon ascended to the sky above.
I think I'm going to head on home now, said Twilight. It's been a long day, and I'm getting tired, even with all that coffee. Another busy day tomorrow. I'm sure you know what I mean.
Understood. I'll get a few bags of coffee beans before I leave, Forest Mist said. It was an honor to meet you again, Twilight Sparkle. In a calculated move, he came over to her side and took her hoof in his. He brought it to his face and kissed it, as much out of longing as out of respect. Her cheeks turned red, and she almost found herself giggling.
Wow, this is really going to take some time getting used to.
Used to what?
Every pony treating me like this.
You should learn to embrace it. Many ponies respect what you've done for Equestria.
He gave her another kiss on the hoof, and went on inside the cafe to get those bags of beans. But Twilight stood still in her chair for a few minutes, dazed and confused by the way she was just treated. Forest Mist had gotten to her. She already considered him to be a friend, but she found herself wishing it was Saturday morning already, and not just so she could catch up with her brother and the best full sitter ever. Why was she acting like this? And was it right for her to be feeling about him in this manner? Then again, there was no reason to suggest he was a bad pony to her. Even though she didn't know his true intentions, on the surface he seemed nice, intelligent, and handsome. Nothing suggested there was more to him than that. But that was the result of careful planning. By the time Forest Mist exited the cafe with half a dozen coffee bean bags hanging around his back, Twilight was gone. She went on home and left him to do as he pleased. So he went on and trotted through the dirt roads until he was out of Ponyville. Here, no pony could see what he was about to do. Sombra transformed back into his true shape, though he was bare of clothing. The armor would have been visible had he kept it on, even in the form of Forest Mist. He had to consider every possibility to keep his cover intact. And now he had 2 pawn pieces in place, ready to advance his plans. Not only was Twilight starting to change in the ways he needed her to, but he would finally get to meet Princess Cadance this weekend, face to face for the first time since his defeat. Everything was coming together, and he had the makings for dozens of delicious cups of coffee. Then he stopped in his tracks. It was shocking that a king would act so silly over a cup of that stuff, and he wondered if he fit under the definition of the new word, adorkable. While he flew on the rest of the way home, he was interested to find out if the 2 of them had more in common than he initially assumed. It sure seemed that way, and that would only serve to create the effect he wanted for the future. But first, more coffee. Well, it's certainly getting better. A lot better. A lot more fun, a lot more dark. Oh boy. And I have a new stereotype. For characters, I have a new stereotype. As well as every guard being Batman, every waiter is now French. Yes, every waiter is now French. Because why the hell not? But anyhow. Okay, I guess I don't really have all that much to say, this time around. Other than I can't do Mayor Mare's voice worth crap. And, so yeah, that's all for now, every pony. There's not really much to say. So, anyhow, catch you guys later. Or soon. Yeah, soon. Soon sounds better. See you guys soon. They had some ideas about self-preservation. They had some ideas about self-preservation. She spent the next 30 minutes making herself presentable, not preventable. This isn't like any book you've read. Excuse me. And she had to take frequent breaths to frequent breaths. Had to take frequent breaths.
He calls himself Forest Mist.
First Strike answered.
He says he's a good friend of yours, and asked me to deliver this for you.
Oh wait, no.
And asked me to deliver this to you for the first moment I saw you.
No. See. Okay, I'm redoing that.
Sorry I can't attend to that. Wait. Sorry I can't attend to the party that opinion. Sorry I can't attend to the party pink.
I keep tripping up over the words. Fuck you, Forest Mist. Fuck you.
Sorry I can't attend to the party that the pony. I can't attend to the party the pony Pinkie Pie is throwing.
And then he noted how easy it was to strike a conversation with her. She was just as intellectually curious as he was just as Okay. This is getting old. Me tripping up is getting old. Sombra transformed back into his true Oh, come on, really? Sombra transformed back into his true shape. Why is that so hard?